Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're diving into source material that attempts to answer one of the absolute most profound mysteries of human existence, and that is, what truly keeps us healthy and happy as we go through life? We are constantly bombarded with messages about what we should be striving for, right? But today, we're cutting through all that noise. We're going to look at cold, hard, decades-long data to find out what actually matters in the end.
But first, I want to ask you a direct question. If you were going to invest right now in your future best self, where exactly would you put your time and your energy? Seriously, think about it for just a second. If you wanted to absolutely guarantee a good life for yourself, what is the very first thing you would focus on today?
Okay, let's dive into this, because the answers most people give are pretty revealing. In a recent survey asking millennials about their most important life goals, over 80% said that a major goal was to get rich. And get this, another 50% of those exact same young adults said they wanted to become famous. We're constantly told by society to lean into work, to push harder, to achieve more. And honestly, it highlights a massive modern misconception we have about success.
Now, the big problem with trying to figure out what actually makes a good life is that our usual methods are, well, deeply flawed. Most of what we know about human life comes from simply asking people to remember their past. But hindsight is anything but 20/20. We literally forget vast amounts of what happens to us throughout our lives. And on top of that, human memory is downright creative. It fills in the blanks. We simply can't trust it to give us the whole picture.
So, how do we get the real picture? What if we didn't have to rely on patchy memories or hindsight at all? What if instead we could actually watch entire lives unfold through time? Just imagine the clarity we'd have if we could study people from the time they were teenagers, tracking their every choice, every single milestone, all the way into old age, just to see what actually keeps them happy and healthy.
Well, it turns out researchers actually did that. Enter the Harvard study of adult development. And this number right here, 75, represents an absolutely massive, almost unbelievable feat of research credibility. Through sheer luck and the sheer persistence of several generations of researchers, this study has tracked adult lives for an unprecedented 75 years. Studies like this almost never happen. They usually fall apart within a single decade because funding drops or participants just leave. But they stuck with it. They tracked exactly 724 men year after year, constantly asking them about their work, their home lives, and their health. And the craziest part? The project is still going. They're now beginning to study the more than 2,000 children of these original men. Remarkably, about 60 of the original 724 men are still alive and participating in the study today, mostly in their 90s. And who they studied is just as fascinating as how long they studied them. Starting back in 1938, they followed two completely different groups of men. The first group was made up of highly privileged Harvard College sophomores who finished school during World War II. The second group, boys from Boston's absolute poorest neighborhoods. These were kids specifically chosen from deeply troubled, disadvantaged families living in tenements without even hot and cold running water. And these teenagers grew up to become factory workers, bricklayers, doctors, and even one president of the United States.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer visceral reality of the data collection. They didn't just mail out basic questionnaires and hope for the best. No, they physically sat in these men's living rooms. They got actual medical records directly from their doctors. They physically drew their blood. They scanned their brains. Eventually, they even started talking to their children and videotaped the men talking with their wives about their deepest concerns. This is as comprehensive and intimate as data gets.
All right, so here we are. The big reveal, the one clear message.
So, what are the lessons that actually come from those tens of thousands of pages of deeply personal, physiological, and psychological data? After 75 years of tracking human existence, what is the ultimate finding of the study? It's this: good relationships keep us happier and healthier, period. I really want you to take a moment to let that sink in. The absolute clearest message from a 75-year, ongoing study isn't about wealth. It isn't about fame. It has absolutely nothing to do with working harder and harder. It is entirely about the quality of our relationships.
So the crucial point is that this singular massive truth breaks down into three actionable insights. The researchers learned three big lessons about relationships from this massive data set. First, social connections physically protect us. Second, quality matters much more than quantity. And third, good relationships actually protect our brains.
Let's dive right into Lesson 1, Social Connections versus Loneliness.
The data clearly showed that people who are more socially connected to their family, to their friends, and to their community are, simply put, happier. But not only that, they're physically healthier, and they actually live longer than people who are less well-connected. But there's a very dark side to this data, captured in this concept of toxic loneliness. The experience of being more isolated than you want to be is literally toxic. These individuals find their health declining earlier in midlife, their brain functioning drops off sooner, and their lives are noticeably shorter. And the truly sad fact here is that at any given time, more than 1 in 5 Americans report that they are lonely. And remember, you can easily be lonely in a crowded room, or even lonely within a marriage.
Which brings us to lesson 2, the quality of close relationships.
Because it's not about the sheer number of friends you have, and it's not even about whether or not you're in a committed relationship. It's the actual warmth and quality of those closest bonds that dictates your physical well-being. The data reveals that living in the midst of conflict is terribly bad for our physical health. High-conflict marriages, for instance, the ones that lack affection, turn out to be incredibly detrimental. They're perhaps even worse for your health than actually getting divorced. On the flip side, living within good, warm relationships acts as a literal shield. It proves highly protective for your physical health as you age.
Now I want you to put yourself in the shoes of the researchers for a second. You've tracked these men into their 80s, and you decide to look back at their data from when they were 50. How would you predict who was going to grow into a happy, healthy octogenarian and who wasn't?
Well, here is the really surprising answer. It wasn't their middle-age cholesterol levels that predicted how they were going to grow old. Nope, it was how satisfied they were in their relationships. The people who were the most satisfied at age 50 were the healthiest at age 80. In fact, happily partnered people in their 80s reported that even on days when they suffered physical pain, their mood stayed happy. But for the unhappy people, their physical pain was actually magnified by their emotional pain.
Moving on to Lesson 3, Protecting the Brain.
Now this brilliantly illustrates where the study gets incredibly fascinating. Good relationships don't just protect our bodies and our physical health, they literally protect our cognitive functions. People in relationships where they feel they can truly count on the other person in times of need find that their memories stay sharper for much longer. Contrast that with those who feel they cannot count on their partner, they actually experience earlier memory decline. What's amazing, though, is that the securely attached couples didn't have to have smooth sailing every single day. They could bicker day in and day out, but as long as that foundational trust was there, the arguments didn't take a toll on their brains.
Okay, finally, let's talk about building a good life.
So if the data is this crystal clear, why is this age-old wisdom so hard for us to accept and so easy to ignore? Well, frankly, it's because relationships are messy. They're complicated. The hard work of tending to family and friends totally lacks the glamour of a quick fix. It's a lifelong endeavor that never really ends. But the people in the study who are happiest actively worked at it. Let's say you're 25 or 40 or 60. How can you lean in right now? Well, you can replace screen time with actual people time. You can liven up a stale relationship by doing something completely new together, like taking long walks or setting up regular date nights. Or you can reach out to a family member you haven't spoken to in years to finally end a grudge, because those feuds take a terrible physical toll. Ultimately, the goal is to actively replace workmates with playmates.
I want to share a reflection written more than a century ago by Mark Twain, who was looking back on his own life at the time. He wrote, "There isn't time, so brief is life, for bickerings, apologies, heartburnings, callings to account. There is only time for loving, and but an instant, so to speak, for that." It's just a beautiful, emotional echo of the study's core empirical message. The good life is built with good relationships.
Which leaves us with one final thought. The data's in. The 75-year study has spoken. So how will you invest in your relationships today? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this sparks a conversation or a connection that makes your life just a little bit brighter today. See you next time.